Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about door locks. I'd like to thank Tom Anderson. He gave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes. So the oldest known door locks go back about 4,000 years ago in Egypt, and what they had was a bolt of wood that held the door locked in place. So they had 2 blocks of wood, and in these blocks of wood there were hidden pins that dropped into this bolt. So like a 2x4 that you would slide in and out to hold the door locked in place. Mm-hmm. And in that 2x4 that held the door, what it had was these small little openings, and you would slide this little key. It was the first key, and it almost looked like a toothbrush with just a few bristles on it, and they were spaced uniquely. Each key was unique. You'd put it into a little channel into this 2x4 that held the door in place, put it in the channel, you'd lift it up, and those pins would lift these hidden pins that were in that block of wood, and that allowed the pins to go up. You would slide the wood over, and now these pins were resting on the top edge of the 2x4. So you could slide this out, you open the door, and then when you wanted to lock it, you slide that piece of wood back, and those pins from gravity dropped into these holes, and you could not move that piece of wood. So just very cool. And this is going back 4,000 years ago, and all of this was made in wood. So they were lucky to have a couple of these that were preserved so they could see how they made it, but I guess just the woodworking was just beautiful in this. Then it wasn't until 1848 where Linus Yale created the first modern door lock, and it was a cylinder pin and tumbler style, so very similar to what we use today. And that Yale company is still making locks, and they're rated one of the top companies for door locks.
So why don't you describe how a modern lock works?
So there's a cylinder that spins to lock and unlock the door or the lock. And that cylinder is as long and as wide as your key. Inside the lock itself, there's 5 or 6 pins above that cylinder, and then let's say there's 5 pins. There's 5 pins inside the cylinder itself.
And so these pins, they're tiny little...
Yeah, very tiny. And they match the length of the grooves cut into a key. Mm-hmm. So each lock is going to have a different group of pins with different heights. So when you slide that key into the cylinder itself, these little pins, the lower pins, are all exactly cut so that that cylinder top is flush. So those 5 holes that are cut into that cylinder, when you slide the key in, they match the key. Mm-hmm. Above that, let's say there's 5 pins, you have 5 upper pins with a spring above it that are pushing these top pins down. When the lower pins and the upper pins match, it creates a shear line, is what it's called, and now that cylinder can slide left and right. But if you pull the key out, and let's say we put a different key, a wrong key, so the grooves don't push the pins up at the right height, those pins are going to be wedged so you cannot turn that cylinder. So just a really simple design that allows the cylinder to turn with the correct key.
So every lock manufacturer has their own set of key blanks for their type of lock.
Correct. So if you go to your local hardware store, probably the 2 most common are Schlage and Kwikset. And each key is going to have its own shape. So not only does it have unique cuts for those grooves, but the style, the cuts on the side of the key and the shape of it each key is different. So you can't put a Schlage key in a Kwikset lock.
So if you're going to purchase a new deadbolt and you're only purchasing a deadbolt, you're not purchasing a combination kit.
Right.
You need to make sure that it's the same manufacturer as your door lock.
If you want your keys to be keyed the same. So you can go to a hardware store or to a locksmith, and let's say you want one key to open your entry lock and your deadbolt. You can have them key them the same. So they'll take those pins out in the cylinder itself, those bottom pins, and they'll match those to the grooves cut in your key. But you have to have both locks.
And if you want to see something that's very frustrating for the employee to do that either doesn't do it often,
right,
watch somebody rekey a lock.
So we did this at our hardware stores. It takes a little skill.
Tweezers and...
Right, and then
where did the spring go?
Right, well, if you do it wrong and you pull out the cylinder and you don't have all those top pins and the springs locked in place, they can just all fly out. Now you've got to take real tiny tweezers and slowly try to feed them all back in.
I'm sure a locksmith does it a lot faster
Right.
and a
Professor
clean
Me,
workspace.
But that's one of the cool things about if you're moving into a new home, and let's say you want to, and they have beautiful locks on there, let's say they have really expensive locks, you really don't want somebody else to have the keys that you have. So you can take those locks and you can run them to your local hardware store or a locksmith, and you can have them rekey it, and so you can keep those expensive locks, and you'll have a custom key made that nobody else has the same key, or the previous owner doesn't have the same key. So that's kind of a nice thing you can do if you're moving into an existing house.
So one tip when you're in the hardware store and you're looking in the door lock aisle, if you have two sets of locks that are cable tied together,
Right.
those are already keyed the same by the manufacturer.
Right, which is really convenient. If you're trying to put a lock on your front door and your back door, you're going to have the same key.
So a lot of times customers don't know that, and employees don't know that either, so they'll cut the cable tie when they're putting it away.
And this was a mated pair of locks for that reason.
So, but they will be, there's a code on the door lock itself, the packaging, that'll say it's keyed alike, so you could kind of match them up if they're not, cable tied together anymore.
Exactly. And then there's kits too. So you'll have one package that has an entrance lock and a deadbolt, and then you can have that cable tied with another entrance lock and deadbolt. So you can have, one set for the front door and one set for the back door, and all one key fits all, which is really convenient. You've got one key for entry. And then I would say if you're moving into an existing home and the previous owner had the key and you're changing your locks, the one thing that you're looking for is the style of lock that you're replacing. So when you look at the plate on the latch itself, some are going to be squared off so it looks like a hard rectangle. Some are going to be shaped with a little bevel. And then some don't have a plate. They're just pounded in. They're just a drive-in, so there's no mortise. There's no indentation in the side of the door. So you really want to match up what's there at your house, that plate, to what you're buying, because now you don't have to chisel it out and do that extra work.
So you're talking like the strike plate on the side? So
on the door itself, there's usually they're going to mortise in, so they're going to cut a little notch. There's a plate where the pin or the latch pushes out, and around that you're going to have this either rectangle or rounded rectangle. And it's nice just to match. It just makes it easy if you're changing your lock. Another thing you need to think about is if you're replacing existing door locks is whether it's right-handed or left-handed. Many packages are going to say they're reversible, so you can use it either right or left swing, how the door swings. But if you're on the outside of your house looking at your door, if the hinges are on the right side, you want a right-handed door lock. If you're looking from the outside at your door and the hinges on the left side, it's left-handed. And that doesn't matter whether the door opens in or out. It's just what side, as you're facing your house, the hinge is on.
So what happens if you buy the wrong one?
Then your lock is going to be upside down. So if you have a lever lock, the lever could get in the way of the door frame. So for a lever lock, you want it, facing the main part of the door. And then for a regular standard, let's say a round handle, your key could be going in upside down rather than right side up.
So if you're purchasing a new lock for your front door, you need an entry lock.
Right. So that's the main knob that you're turning to open the door.
Right, but that shouldn't be your only security.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're buying a new home and you're a new homeowner and the house just has an entry lock, that is not for security. It's going to keep your door shut, and it's easy to close because the entry locks are spring-loaded. They have a latch that's a bevel on the latch, so as you push the door strike plate pushes against that bevel. It pushes that spring-loaded latch in, and you're able to shut your door. So really nice, and it's lockable, and you use a key on it. So you can either use, have a thumb turn inside, or there's going to be a button that you push to lock it. But a lot of these, you can actually take a knife and work it on that bevel and pop open that entry lock. And it's one of the easiest with a hammer or pliers or a pipe wrench just to snap those entrance locks. So they are really not designed for security. And in fact, the latch itself usually only extends about 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch into that strike plate. And that's, just really not secure. If you want an entry lock that is a little more secure, you'd want to buy one that says it has a dead locking latch, and there's this extra piece of metal that slides behind the latch, and that just prevents a knife from easily being wedged behind there. So that's what you're looking for that. But for security, you have to get a deadbolt, and that's what we really want to focus on for security for our house.
Why don't you describe what the difference is between a deadbolt and an entrance lock?
So a deadbolt has to be operated manually by either turning a key or a thumb turn from the inside. They're not spring-loaded, so it's just locked into place. And the industry standard is getting a deadbolt that goes 1 inch into a metal strike plate, and then that strike plate is screwed into the door frame. And there's a couple styles you can get, and you have to be careful when you buy one. Some are operated by 2 keys, so you have a key on the outside to get in and lock the door, and then they have a key on the inside, which is dangerous if there's ever a fire in the house and you can't find your key. You know, it's not code in most apartments, depending on where you are, because it's just a safety hazard. So you would, in most cases, you're going to want a key operated from the outside and then the thumb turn on the inside of the door. And the FBI actually says that 65% of all home break-ins are through the front or the back door, somebody kicking in and gaining entrance that way. And there's actually 2 million burglaries every year in the U.S.
Wow.
From kicking in the front or back door. And the problem is, you know, if you just have an entry lock, you know, there is just no security. So this deadbolt, and then we'll talk a little bit later on how to make it more secure, is really what we're going to use for security.
Well, so my grandparents had their old house. They just had, you know, the entrance lock on it, and it was so old. I mean, I would guess it's at least 30 years old.
Okay.
That at some point it would just, you know, they would close it, lock the door, and then the door would pop back open.
Because sometimes those latches just
Right.
barely fit
I
in.
mean,
and if there's a little separation on your door, right?
You know, they didn't even have the key anymore for the front door, so this was like the back door that, you know, they came in and out of all the time. So, you know, we rekeyed the lock for them just because. But I mean, still the problem was that the lock was so old that it would stick, you know, and it would, like I said, and sometimes you just push on the door, it was locked, but it would still open.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, not good.
Well, what's wild is my mom. So my mom, as she got older, became an antique dealer. So she collected antiques her whole life, and she really got into not only a variety of antiques, but she started specializing in jewelry. And then everybody started to know her, and she actually started having people come over to her condo, and she would show her stuff in these beautiful glass cases. And one day I got a page, this is when I was investing in real estate, and I got a page because it was way back then. And they got home, my mom and my dad got home from work. She was at the antique store, and she rented these spaces, and then she sold out of the house too, out of her condo. And somebody had kicked in the back door, so it just shattered the frame around the door. And so they had a deadbolt and an entrance lock, but they only had just a strike plate, and that strike plate wasn't screwed into the main 2x4 studs that surround the frame of a door. And so they kicked this in. The police were there when I got there, and so actually the police helped them with a guy who installed doors. So they took this wood door and wood frame that they had, and they put in the front and the back of the condo a metal door with a metal frame. And this guy screwed this into the studs all around. And like he said, they would have to make so much noise to break the locks. And like you said, there's no way they're going to kick out the frame anymore. Now, so, you know, that's one tip. If you want to have the best security, if you have a solid wood core door or a solid metal door with a metal frame, that's going to give you the best security. Then you have to be conscious of wood doors too. When we were investing in real estate, we had one of our basement doors. It was a solid wood door, but it had 3 panels in it. So it's kind of thin panel. So it had a nice solid wood along the outside, the bottom, but it had these 3 thinner panels. Just, you know, it was a very attractive door. But one day, my business partner and I were coming up the alley, and we had this property we were investing in. And there were 2 guys at the back door, and there was one guy in the walkway between the houses, and he was like looking out. And as we were pulling up, we had our windows down. It was summer, and we heard this pounding, and then we heard this yelping of a dog yelping, and then we heard it again. As we pulled up, one guy was down, so this was a basement stairs going down to our basement door, where they were pounding at the wood panels with, it looked like a crowbar. And so they had broken off and broken down part of the panel. And I guess what they wanted to do was reach in and then unlock the doorknob. Mm-hmm. But the dog, so we always had guard dogs in our houses when we were investing. We either had somebody house sitting or we had a guard dog. And so this dog just wouldn't back down, and it was wild. So we sat there and we acted like we were calling the police, which back then we didn't have cell phones or anything.
From your pager.
Right. Yeah, so I lifted up my pager and acted. So we made eye contact, and it was surreal, man. So, like I said, these two guys were at the back, and they looked at us, we looked at them, we acted like we were calling, and then we took off down the alley, and then we had to run to the corner and actually use a payphone to call the police, but we got the police.
Still payphones?
Yeah. so we came back, and that dog was, we actually they had tore her ear, and so we had to take her to a vet and get her stitched up and everything, but she held out, man, and protected that house for us. But that's one of the things you got to think about, is if you have some of these attractive doors with either the lights, the glass panels, right, or if you have these panel doors that are thin, you have to think about, do I want to upgrade these to a solid door?
Well, it is funny when you're thinking about buying a new door, you're looking at it saying, oh, that's pretty,
right,
instead of, this.
Let's get with all the glass, the light will come in.
Well, oh, that's decorative. I really
right,
like, the etching in it or whatever.
Right.
But, the purpose of the door is to keep people out.
Right.
Not
65% of all break-ins are from your front or back door.
Right, but I can guarantee you people that are looking at it because they're like, oh, that's decorative. I like
right,
the way that looks.
Yeah, get a solid one, man.
Yeah.
So if you have a solid door or a metal door and you really like it and you don't want to change too much, one thing you can do for more security is just add a heavy-duty strike plate. And what you're looking for, and these heavy-duty strike plates, so this is what your latch goes into on the frame of the door. Mm-hmm. And you want to get one that's longer and wider, and some of them are just longer, but you want to affix this with 3-inch screws that actually go into the studs around the frame. And so this is just a simple upgrade. So with a larger strike plate, the better ones have 4 offset screws, so the screw holes are offset so it doesn't go into, let's say, the grain of the wood and make the wood weaker.
Right.
And you're going to want to pre-drill these, but you're going into the studs. It makes it very difficult for somebody to kick in a door and just snap off the wood frame around the door. And then one thing you can add, especially to a wood door, is a wide-angle peephole. And in fact, I did your condo on our Fix It Home Improvement channel. You can check out how to install one of those.
Not requested, by the way.
And then there's 3 grades of door locks. So ANSI, that's the American National Standards Institute, and BHMA, that's the Builders Hardware Manufacturers Association, have a grading system. And anything rated number 1 is the highest rating. These are the best locks you can buy, usually for commercial. They're expensive, and they're made for rugged, heavy-duty use. If you're looking for a better grade for residential, you're looking for a number 2. This is heavy-duty residential. And then just a good quality lock is rated 3. So you're looking for probably a 2 or a 3 in most situations, and your 2, again, you're not going to spend a lot more money, but it's anti-pick, they're heavy-duty metal, and it's going to stand up to being either hit with a hammer or kicked in. So if your door just has an entry lock and you're thinking about adding a deadbolt, one thing you want to do is measure how far back that entry lock is so that you can match the deadbolt to it. So usually from the center of the lock to the edge of the door, the front edge of the door, most residential locks are set back 2 3/8 inch, and commercial locks are set back 2 3/4 of an inch. But most of the locks are actually adjustable, so that back set you can turn the latch and it's adjustable. So you don't want your entry lock, one depth and your deadbolt the other. So one thing you want to do is make sure that you measure from the center of the lock to the edge of the door, and you want to match that, or just make sure that you get a deadbolt that's adjustable so that you can either set it to 2 3/8 or 2 3/4.
So what if you have a new door with no locks on it?
So your entry lock, you're going to want to have about 36 inches to 38 inches off the bottom of the door. And the International Building Code says that the locks, so the entrance and the deadbolt, should be installed between 34 to 48 inches. Most companies recommend that you put the deadbolt 4 to 6 inches above the entry lock. So let's say you're at 38 inches for the entry lock. Your deadbolt is going to be above that, 4 to 6 inches higher.
When you buy a new lock, does it come with a template?
So they're going to have a paper template that you can unfold, and you put it against the door, and it's going to wrap around. So you decide your height, and then you put this piece of paper on the door, and you make a mark for the center of the back set, and then it wraps around the front lip of the door so that you can center it depending on the width of your door. And most doors are going to be 1 3/8 or 1 3/4. And it's actually smart to measure your door, because if you have something that's not standard, you're going to have to get a specialty lock from a locksmith. And then you also have to be conscious, is it a metal door or a wood door? Because most kits are designed just to go into wood doors. So if you have a metal door, you're going to need a special kit that has a bimetal hole saw. And we're creating a 2 1/8 inch hole for the lock itself. And then on the edge of the door where the latch goes, you're going to need a 1-inch hole. And I really like the Irwin has a real nice kit that's IRWIN, and DeWalt has really nice kits, and they have a plastic guide. So it's like a self-centering jig, because what's tough sometimes is, and you're going to need a drill for this, it's tough to keep your drill perfectly square and level, because if you go in at an angle, you've got a problem.
Right.
So what's nice about these kits, if you haven't done this a lot, and if you don't have, let's say, a level or a square to help guide, you can buy these kits that have a plastic jig, and it guides your tool just straight into the door.
Right.
And then if you're going through a metal or wood door, you don't want to take that hole saw and go all the way through, because you'll blow out on the other side. So you want to drill halfway through, and then as you put that in, I would always like using an extra drill bit as a pilot, run through the side that you started so that small hole is blown out, and then use that as a guide and come through the other side.
So when you're purchasing these kits, are they going to be by the door locks, or generally they were by the drill bits, right?
Exactly. So it depends on the store, but many of the hardware stores are merchandising it by the drill bits. So that's probably where you would go.
So it's either going to be by the rest of the hole saws, or it's going to be, generally it's low.
Right.
And it's
because they don't sell a
door
lot.
kit.
Right, exactly.
It's going to be labeled a door kit. Installation kit.
And then, Ryobi, Milwaukee, and Bosch all have really nice kits, and we sold these at our hardware store, and just, they did a nice job.
If you're installing a lock into a new door, what tools are you going to need?
So in a wood door, you're going to need a drill, you're going to need one of these kits to create the holes, you're going to need a chisel, because the latch plate itself, we're going to have to create a little mortise, so we're going to have to create an indent so that sets flush with the edge of the door. I really like having a square, because when you draw your lines, I like using a square to draw a nice line so that everything matches. You'll need some type of razor knife. I would use a screwdriver. When I'm tightening the screws on the lock itself, I don't like using a drill, because you can over tighten it and strip things. And then you're going to need to drill pilot holes, usually a 3/32 drill bit to create those pilots. And then if you have a metal door, most metal doors, they're going to have the indents already created for you. So one question I got a lot from customers at the hardware store was how to use a chisel. And I always liked having a chisel that was as wide as the plate itself. So usually 1.25 inches, 1.125. So if you don't have a chisel and you're buying your locks, you can buy one that matches that. And then you're going to put your latch on let's say now that we've created our hole for the lock, that's 2 1/8 inch. We're going to create the hole that the latch is going to set in, which is 1 inch. we're going to set our latch into the edge of the door, and we're going to use a pencil or razor knife, and we're going to draw the outline of this. And now we're going to take our chisel, and we're going to hit the edge of this to create a little indent. One trick you can do is take a little masking tape, and you can measure the depth of that plate and put a little masking tape around the chisel so that you're only pounding it that deep, and you're not going in very far. You're going to create an outline with the chisel, and then the chisel is going to have a flat edge and a beveled edge. Once you chisel the outline, you're going to use the beveled edge down, and you're going to start carving out that depth. A trick that you can use is you can put a series of slices in that outline. So let's say you've done the border, you can just start hitting a little notch in little increments all the way down that rectangle. Right. And now it's very easy to push that out. And you can actually just use your hand. You don't even have to use a hammer in many cases. And so that's kind of the tip to easily create a mortise on the edge of the door for the strike plate.
What are some top-rated door locks?
So most hardware stores are going to carry Schlage, Kwikset, and Yale. And Schlage is Schlage. Kwikset is Kwikset, and then Yale. And what's nice about these...
Well, spell Yale.
Yale, Yale. What's nice is they're easy to rekey, they're the most popular, they're top rated, and it's very nice if you ever have a problem. You can take it to any hardware store if you want to rekey it or you got a problem with your key. So some of the new technology in deadbolts, they've got electronic touchscreen deadbolts that have self-closing latches. So it's pretty cool. So I picked one up from Schlage, and I actually tried to install it into this house that had double doors. And because the doors have to be lined up perfectly all the time, because this thing's electronic, it automatically goes in and out, I couldn't install it in this. So actually I'm going to be doing an upcoming video, so you can check out our Fix-It Home Improvement channel on YouTube, and I'll be showing how to install this Schlage electronic touchscreen deadbolt. But it's pretty cool. So you don't need a key, and what's nice is if you just lock your deadbolt, and let's say you have kids that lose their keys, or you don't want them to have a key, you can reprogram this to different codes. Over time, let's say you can give that code to relatives. Let's say somebody's coming over to visit. So it's kind of an interesting technology. It has a touch screen. It's a grade 1. It's anti-pick. It is the self-closing bolt, and it has an alarm built in. So it's really cool. It actually works with a mobile app. So if anybody tries to kick in your door or mess with it, an alert comes up on your smart device.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's really an interesting lock, and so I'm actually looking forward to putting that in. And then, so that's from Schlage. Kwikset has something called Kivo, Kevo, and this uses your smartphone as the key, or you can have this key fob to open it up. So you come up to your deadbolt, and if you have the fob in your, let's say, connected to your keychain, you just touch it with your finger, the deadbolt, and then it senses to see whether the fob or your smart device is near, and then it unlocks, so it unlocks it for you. So that's kind of interesting. And then if you want to give this code to like family members or somebody stopping by to do some work at your house, you can send them a code on their smartphone. They come in and they use the app on the smartphone, and it'll unlock it for them, which is just amazing. And then, like, let's say that you only wanted somebody to come in for one day, then you discontinue that code, and you can change the codes all the time. And then they have an app that shows who and when people are coming in and out of your house, and what code. So you can give a different code to a different person. So it's kind of interesting.
It'd be tough for kids sneaking in and out of your house.
Yeah, it's all over, kids. New technology. And then the latest thing, which they're trying to push, are fingerprint locks. So you come up to your deadbolt and you put your finger on it, and then you can decide how many people can use this. So you have somebody come and put their finger on it, and you can either accept them or deny them.
Nice.
So that's kind of the future of deadbolts.
So let's wrap this up.
So I'd make sure I would always have a deadbolt on front door and the back door. the minimum thing I would do for existing locks is to make sure that your strike plate is a security strike plate, so it has 3-inch screws that are going into your stud, and that's really going to give you security. And then if you're changing your deadbolt or your locks, make sure that you match the companies, so you would have your entrance lock and your deadbolt with the same company, and that way you can have them keyed alike. You only have to have one key.
So I guess that's the end of this episode.
You can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher if you like the podcast.
And if you really liked it, you can leave us a review.
That would be nice. You can also check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you could subscribe to that as well.
If you'd like to email us, you can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.